he's from KPFF, working with Sound Transit on their light rail, and he's working on the tunnel in downtown Seattle.
Yes, it seems like I've been working on this project for a long time, but it is finally coming. If you guys have been down to the airport lately, it's more visible down there than anywhere. I was remembering back on when I would go to student chapter meetings, and it's been over 20 years ago, which is hard to believe. And I remembered sitting there trying to imagine what I would be doing with my career, you know, and I remember it was just almost impossible to imagine. But I wanted to tell you that it was different than I expected. I've been working now for over 20 years, but it's also better than I expected. It's been a really interesting career. Civil engineering's been a lot of fun. So when I first got out of school, I thought I'd give you kind of a rundown on how I ended up where I am. When I got out of school, there was nothing going on, and I applied all over the place. But it's hopping now. You guys won't have any trouble. But I did get a job with WashDOT, and I worked on the I-90 construction when we built the new floating bridge down there, and it was really fun because most of the crew were guys that had hired on to build I-5, and they were all getting close to retirement, and you know they really knew what they were doing, and at the same time they didn't give a rip. So it was a lot of fun working with those guys, and they put me in the field surveying, did construction inspection, and worked out design changes in the field. They really threw me right into the thick of it, and I think you'll find that you just get thrown into just about anything. I worked a little bit in WashDOT design, working on small highways, 2-lane highways. The district I was working in was Skagit County and Island County, so it was kind of the dream field trip job. Love that one. After working for those guys for 5 years, my wife and I decided that we were going to quit and go traveling, so we took a whole year off. Nobody thought that was such a great idea, but I highly recommended it. If for nothing else, I got to look at how other people do engineering projects around the world. You know, it's like a one-year field trip. And I got a job almost immediately as soon as I started looking. So, you know, don't listen to the naysayers on taking time off. After that, when I did come back to work, I went to a firm. It's called KCM. It's now called Tetra Tech KCM. And I worked a lot on large diameter pipelines. They do a lot of flood projects and stream hydraulics. So it was a totally different experience from working for the state. It was also my first job as a private consultant. See how they did things. I worked a little bit on West Point, also did a lot of water jobs. So they had a real interesting mix. I then moved on to KPFF, which is where I work now, and they're more of a civil structural firm. Been doing roadways, and I got to do some of my first bridge jobs with the structural engineers. And I got started on the commuter rail with Sound Transit, and that was probably 6 or 7 years ago. And I've done nothing but Sound Transit work ever since. And there's a ton of it to do. I mean, I'm going to be moving on to ULink, because we're going to be bringing light rail down here by Husky Stadium. So that's kind of two. Some of the observations that I would have thought it would have been interesting if somebody would have told me before I started this whole thing is I think it's really good for your career to jump back and forth between design and construction jobs. It makes you a better designer. It makes you a better person in construction because you can really understand it from both ways. It can be a little painful. The first time I went out as a resident engineer on a job that I designed, we're standing around a culvert looking at it, and they're going, "God, you designed this thing. This really sucks." And I go, "Can't be me." You know, so there's nowhere to hide, but you don't forget. You don't make that mistake again. So, and I've done that throughout my career. I'll work in design for a few years, and you know, if you get tired of doing it, you get tired of doing the same old thing over and over again. You could jump back and you can take a design, a construction position, get you out in the field. You can see how things are put together. It's really pretty interesting to work out there with people who've been doing that. Another thing I would tell people is to avoid being put in a pigeonhole. A lot of times if you're really good at something, say you're a stormwater geek and you just know this program inside and out, I can tell you you're going to be doing a lot of that because they'll say, "Oh, give it to this guy, he knows what he's doing." So you got to really watch that and not try to get stuck in something because you'll get tired of it eventually and you'll want to do something else. So you just have to be careful to kind of try lots of different things, be well-rounded And one friend of mine calls himself a generalist because he can do anything. He can do water, sewer, roads, bridges, and he does them all pretty well. And he gets all different kinds of projects, so it's more interesting that way. One thing that I really learned in Sound Transit, it was the first projects where I worked with a lot of different disciplines, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, landscape architects. And I discovered that you can learn a lot from those people if you're receptive and open to what they're trying to do. Some engineers just say, "Oh, don't bother me with that. I don't want to know about that." But if you listen to them, it also helps you in your design because you understand where they're coming from. And that kind of ties in with another thing I was going to tell you about how the civil engineers are leading more and more of these large infrastructure projects. It's kind of moving out of the architectural realm into the civil engineering realm because they find that the civil engineers know more about all different subjects. And the other one is one that I wouldn't have really expected, and it turns out that that your people skills are really important. Some disciplines of engineering you can just go sit in your office and run calcs and work on your space frames and things like that. But for civil engineers, you really got to talk to people to find out what's going on. You're going to be working with agencies and with private parties and with architects. So you really have to know how to talk and communicate with people. And boy, I tell you this, I do more talking than I do calculator. The calculator's in the desk most of the time, but I'm on the phone all day long. So I thought I'd share a little bit with you about the light rail project and what I've been doing, because I started working on this in 2000 in the Rainier Valley. This must be just in black and white. Huh? The first projects that I worked on is this section in the Rainier Valley from down here at Boeing Access Road up to about where Franklin High School is. It's one of the longest segments that they put into a design package, and it's also turned out to be one of the most problematic. I don't know if you guys have been down there, but it looks like a war zone down there because it's all torn up. They undergrounded the power from overhead power and tried to jam everything into a very narrow 90-foot corridor. So I did not work in construction on that, but I did work in design for quite a while. And I brought some renderings. This isn't built yet. They're just now, they've got the curbs back on both sides, and they're starting to do some concrete paving, but this is a computer graphic of what it's going to look like. This is the Othello station at the Othello intersection down in Rainier Valley. And it's the center, the trains run down the middle of the street, and there's platforms on both sides. And my job on this project, they called me the Systems Integration Manager. So when I started, I didn't even know what that was. But pretty soon I figured it out, that it basically was like loading frogs into a wheelbarrow. I would get the structural engineer to tell me what he was going to do. Then I'd get the architect to figure out what the structural engineering job. Well, meanwhile, the structural engineer jumped out and they were doing something else. So I had to keep all these people kind of working in the same area. And we had architects, obviously, who were doing all the layout. This is what it looks like on the platform level. The structurals who have to turn in whatever the architects dream up, they got to figure out how to build it. The landscape architects are responsible for all the landscaping and irrigation around the stations. The systems engineers are the electrical engineers that have everything to do with powering the train signals,